Hello, FPL managers. Welcome to the FPL Optimized podcast. This is episode number 63. I am Bas, the casual manager, and my co host is Sertalp, the data scientist. This is the podcast in which we combine analytics with the good old eye test. Data or grass, or data and grass? That's the question. And first things first, Sertalp, I know you had an amazing score, and I also know you want to brag about it. So let's get it over with. How did your team do in game week 9?
Yeah, my team did amazingly well in game week 9. I finished with 120 points, so I'm in the 100-point club early in the
Wow,
season, which is great.
nice.
I wasn't
Congrats.
really expecting it, thank you. But yeah, I was just lucky, to be honest. And
No,
like
no,
go
no. Come on.
I mean, yeah,
It's more than luck.
I feel it's more to do with luck. Again, it's just fancy Monopoly.
Right.
Sorry to
Okay.
bring it up again, but yeah, I rolled
Yeah.
the dice nicely this game week. Is how I feel, to be honest.
Okay.
Like some of the picks, obviously, like wildcard helped a lot, but
Yes.
I mean, you kind of expect to have a difference to the fields, but that difference is usually around like maybe 5 points, 10 points. So you are increasing the gap every game week. That's the average case, and that's what I was expecting too. But in the long run, to have more points against the field. But then this game week I had almost like 45 points over the field average, which is
Mhm.
again like within the possibilities, obviously. But this was very very unlikely. Like my game week rank is like 1,800 or something. So
Yeah.
I mean, in a game with 10 million players, that's kind of like very
Yeah.
unexpected. Like almost all of my
No.
players returned points,
Yeah.
except Cash. So yeah, how was your game week?
Yeah, well, not as great as yours, but still decent. But first of all, again, congratulations. I think, yeah, you had an amazing score. I'm happy for you. I think our head-to-head score is still 5-4 in my advantage, but you're almost there.
Almost there.
And I think the fact that you could improve your OR so fast in a couple of weeks' time also gives me still confidence. I'm still behind, but you've shown that it can still be done.
Hmm.
There's still a lot of ground we can gain if we get things right. So yeah, my week 78 points. Certainly better than the 22 points I had last game week. And
There's
I also
improvement.
was yes. I also was about above the average score, which was 67, but the game week rank was 2.7 million, so it's still not brilliant. But looking at the team, 7 out of my 11 players returned points, so
Hmm.
they did better than, let's say, 2 points. So it's not so much, I think, that I can blame the players that I owned. It's more that I just, yeah, still didn't own a few key players. And to name a few, I don't own Salah, I don't own Watkins, I don't own Trippier, and I also don't own Alvarez. So I think
Hmm.
that hurt me. But okay, 78 points, 2 free transfers, wild card still available. So I'm quite excited for the weeks ahead. So yeah, we can, or I can build on this, I
Not using
think.
your wild card, right?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I think with the 2 free transfers, I can bring in Salah, but we can talk about it later.
Okay.
And yeah, I'll still keep it for later.
Okay.
All right, so let's jump into our usual content. Normally, we start with covering the model accuracy, but you and I talked about it a bit last week. We think we don't need to cover this every week as it doesn't change too much. But maybe you want to explain it a bit more.
Yeah, certainly. So we were obviously tracking the accuracy of these prediction models, but
Yeah,
as we proceed into the almost the middle phase of the season, they
yeah,
started to converge somewhere. So we don't want to repeat the same information every game week, and we will
right.
probably cover it every month to see where
Yeah,
they are going. But it seems like we have a good idea on like which models are more accurate than others. in general and what's the accuracy of the models in general.
Yes.
But yeah, lately we have been more thinking about the utility measure, like how useful a model is to the user. Not only, the most accurate model, but, what's the order of players, what's the utility in general. So in last episode, we kind of introduced this measure where we were checking the free hit and bench boost every game week with models, and then we were checking how many points they have collected. So we got some feedback on that, and people thought, it's not enough to include only like 15 players. Maybe we should increase the number of players. Because, I can see the merit in it, because like you usually work with a pool of players, and then you pick players among them. So we increased this number to 45. So we have 5 goalkeepers, 15 defenders, 15 midfielders, and 10 forwards. So, and we are again allowing models to pick anyone. So like this is the top 45 players they pick. And then we check how many points they have scored in reality. And then checking, what's the utility of the model based on this. Again, I should repeat myself here, but this is something that we are actively working on. We will probably change this a couple of times until we find something that will make us happy. But yeah, based on this measure, FPL review is the most useful model. So it gives something around, I think, 1800-ish if you do this. And then it's 9 game weeks, 45 players every week. If you just divide it, it is 4.74 points per pick. And the lowest model is FPL team with 4.36 points per pick. So as you see, the margin is not that big, but it might be a bigger difference when you are actually using these models actively. And there's only 1 point difference between FPL Review and Fantasy Football Fix, which is in the second place. And then we have Mikael Tokvam and Fantasy Football Scout. They are also close to each other and also the top 2. And then we have Fantasy Football Hub, then Draft Hound, and as I mentioned, we have FPL team at last rank with this measure. So we will be keeping an eye on this, and we will be hopefully improving the utility measure, but that's where we are right now.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we can give some regular updates on this. Thanks for sharing it. It's progress, not perfection. I think it's a quote sometimes being used. All right, makes sense. Thanks. So yeah, the next topic to look at is the team's ranking by offensive and defensive strengths, as we do every week. As this gives us an idea of the teams we should be investing in or the teams we should avoid.
Yes. So we have, by the way, before even I start, I was kind of like sorting these teams based on, the summation of the entire horizon, like 6 game week horizon we are checking. So I was just checking what's the, best team. But then I realized that this is not how kind of we are approaching the optimization. We are applying a decay. So shorter horizon is more important than longer horizon. So game week 10, for example, should be more important than game week 15 in this analysis. That's why I applied a decay to sort the team. So everything else remains the same, but the order is based on, if you have good fixtures early on, you should appear more towards the top. It didn't change the order of the teams significantly, but I will go over this list now. And so we, at the first spot, we have Arsenal. And then in the second spot, we have Liverpool. Then comes Manchester City, Newcastle, Brighton, Aston Villa, Tottenham, Manchester United, West Ham, and Crystal Palace. And Arsenal is at the top because they have a really good fixture. This game week, they are playing against Sheffield United. So it is 5.1 defensive average and 5.9 offensive average for predicted points for players. And Liverpool also has a very good fixture. They are playing against Nottingham Forest, and both at home, by the way, both Arsenal and Liverpool. And their defense average is 4.7, and offense average is 5.8. So as you see, these 2 fixtures are the best. Besides these, Aston Villa is playing against Luton Town. That's a favorable fixture with 4.7 defensive point average. in my opinion, Brighton's game against Fulham is also a favorable fixture. They have 5.1 offensive point average. But yeah, for some reason, like models do not rate Brighton midfielders highly. I will probably talk about this in a bit too, but I think minute
Okay.
uncertainty is impacting
Right.
some of these
Yeah.
point averages. Um, but besides these, I mean, Arsenal is at the top because they also have a really good fixture in game week 12. Even though they have Newcastle game between, which is a relatively tough fixture, they are playing against Burnley in game week 12, and then in game week 14 they have Wolves, and then in game week 15 they have Luton Town. So 4 out of 6 fixtures are favorable.
Mm-hmm.
For Liverpool, I mean, the good run continues. We have Nottingham Forest, and then Luton Town, and then Brentford. They only have Manchester City in game week 13, which is a rough game week in general. Like, there is no favorable fixture for that game week. So
Right.
we should be planning that game week carefully, to be honest.
Oh,
And then
yeah.
we have Fulham and then Sheffield United for Liverpool. So they have 5 out of 6 fixtures favorable. But yeah, again, in terms of the point average, Arsenal is at the top. So Arsenal midfielders are kind of a priority for anyone looking to change their teams a little bit. That's what
Mm-hmm.
I will do for my team. But yeah, like if you don't have Liverpool, obviously Salah is a good pick. And then we will talk about Arsenal in general, like picking the midfielders.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's pretty much it. Do you have any comments or
Cool.
questions?
No, I think as every week, it's a good chart to look at. Last week, Liverpool was at the top, and so
Yeah.
now they're number two. Arsenal number one. So I think it just shows that we need to consider basically both teams, of course,
Hmm.
for our teams. Probably the wild card eight managers went more heavy on Liverpool and maybe sold their Arsenal players.
Yeah.
Like I've seen on Twitter a lot of people talking about how they should get Saka back because game week 10 now coming up, Arsenal playing against Sheffield, as you
Yeah.
said, it's a big game. And that will be a tough decision because in some cases people might have to sell Son to get Saka.
Yeah.
But after the strong performance again from Tottenham, I think uh, it's it's a difficult one now to sell Son. So
That's
yeah,
true.
that will be an interesting one, and I think this is maybe where the game week 10 wildcarders could have a benefit because they could go again a bit heavier on the Arsenal options because next to Saka, there's now also Martinelli, who looked also strong yesterday in the Champions League game. So
Yeah.
yeah, so it's good. It's good that we need to
Hmm.
make some decisions and we will see some different approaches.
Yes, certainly. And let's talk
Okay.
about the worst teams.
Yeah.
So we have Luton Town, which has a pretty bad fixture run here. They are playing against Aston Villa, then
Yeah.
Liverpool, then Manchester United. They have the Crystal Palace game in game week 13, which is relatively good news for them. That game week is just, in general, is a really bad game week. But then they have Brentford and Arsenal games. So 5 out of 6 fixtures are unfavorable. So we will see, how if they will be able to collect points in this horizon.
Yeah.
And then in order we have Sheffield United, Nottingham Forest, Wolves, Fulham, Bournemouth, Burnley, Everton, Brentford, and Chelsea. Again, Chelsea appears in the worst teams chart
Yes.
once more, but they have really tough fixtures. Again, they have the Brentford this game week, but they will play against Tottenham,
Yeah.
and then Manchester City, then Newcastle. Brighton game is relatively okay, but then they also have Manchester United. So it's bad news for again,
Yeah.
like if you have Chelsea players. But
Hmm.
despite this, we will see. But in the optimal team, we have a Chelsea player. We will discuss it.
Yeah, and they looked good against Arsenal, right?
Yeah, they did.
They went 2-0 up. They look strong. And I think, as we mentioned last week, yeah, they faced tough fixtures. But after that, so game week 16, they will have a really good run. So, yeah, maybe too early to go in now, even though, to your point, I think a lot of people are talking about Palmer
Mm-hmm.
because he's cheap and because he's also on penalties.
Yes.
But the fixtures don't look that great. But
So,
for the longer run,
mhm.
we could probably get some more confidence in Chelsea again because they,
Yeah,
they, they, they look decent.
yeah, maybe especially after this Horizon run, like after maybe game week 15, if their fixtures get better. Uh, but to your comment about Palmer, so obviously he's on penalties, and that's really huge because
Yeah.
it has been being discussed in the analytics Discord too. But essentially, penalties are not really affected by the fixture quality because you will get in the position. Obviously, there is a chance that you will get penalty or penalties. So your opponent matters, but it matters only a little bit. So you can get a penalty against Manchester City easily or against
Hmm.
Brentford, doesn't matter. That's why penalty takers in general are favored by models. So if you know that there's a cheap guy who is also on penalties, I mean it's almost a no-brainer for you to go and get that player. That's why Palmer appears very heavily in optimization solves. But yeah, that's essentially the comment I wanted
Yeah.
to make.
Okay, cool. Okay, well, that's good. So that covers the teams.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
And
we're going to game week 10, and I think a lot of people kind of flagged game week 10 as a good wildcard possibility. So I think for that reason, the teams ranking is especially relevant this week. It shows the teams we should be considering.
mm-hmm.
I think the next thing to do is that we look at it on a player level, see, or do you
Yeah,
have something else in mind?
I have something in mind to
Okay,
share
all right,
before
go
we
ahead. Yeah.
move forward. So even though like we are checking to average points, like if we just order by fixture quality, then it becomes like Arsenal, Liverpool, Manchester City, and comes Brighton. So Brighton's fixtures, again, as I mentioned, is not bad actually. They're playing against Fulham, then Everton, then Sheffield United, Nottingham Forest. So they have good fixtures. That's why people kind of are considering Brighton midfielders, but they
Yes.
do not appear in optimization solves. So I just wanted to mention that they have good fixtures, but we are not confident in midfielders' minutes. If you
Right.
have a midfielder that you are kind of like confident that will play,
Yeah.
that might be a good thing to consider, or especially for people on their wild card. And
Yeah,
also,
and I think,
yeah,
of course, the player to mention then is Mitoma, right, at
yeah,
Brighton.
mm-hmm,
Because indeed, I think people sometimes say questions about his minutes, but if you look at the game so far, in most games he played 80 to 90 minutes. I think there was just one game where he was benched, and then he came
mm-hmm,
on for the second half and scored 2 goals, if I'm not mistaken.
yeah, yeah,
But in general, his minutes look quite secure. But of course, Brighton has a really busy schedule. They play in Europe for the first time, so they're not really used to that. So there's all that to consider. But I think, yeah, they have some good fixtures coming up, and I think if we would have to pick one from their team, it's probably Mitoma.
mm-hmm,
Uh, question is if you can fit him in, considering all the other players people want to have.
yeah. Yeah, that's the question. And also, I just wanted to talk about this game week 10 projected goals and clean sheet odds. This is
Yeah.
something that we were kind of talking with you to add it to the podcast. So we talked with RobT. It is at
Okay.
RobTFPL on Twitter.
Yeah.
He keeps sharing these market odds based on betting markets. And these are particularly useful, especially if you are just checking a single game week, like what's happening this game week. And also he shares stuff about season-long predictions about, how many goals players will score or how many points teams will collect. In
Yeah.
our case, it's more relevant because we can check clean sheet ratios so
Yes.
that like if you have a kind of like a benching dilemma, these kind of
Mm.
odds are particularly useful.
Yeah.
I see that Arsenal has a 58% chance of keeping a clean sheet, so it's the highest this game week. And also the projected goals for Arsenal against Sheffield United is 3. So
Yeah.
in average, that's how many goals we are expecting them to score. That's
Right.
why, Arsenal midfielders are kind of a priority right now. And
Yeah.
besides that, we have Liverpool, which is expected to score 2.6 goals against Nottingham Forest. And Nottingham
Yeah.
Forest has only like 7% chance of keeping a clean sheet. So
Hmm.
that's why Salah might be a priority for some people. And then we have Aston Villa with 2.55 projected goals against Luton Town, and Luton Town only has 8% clean sheet probability, which means that you might also consider Watkins to buy this game week. I
Yeah,
think those two will be a very popular uh, pick pairs, especially if
definitely.
you have two free transfers. But yeah, just
Yeah.
wanted to mention.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think for Villa, also the next fixtures will be quite attractive. So I think,
Mhm.
yeah, people are definitely looking at it. If you don't own Watkins yet, trying to bring him in. Yeah, yeah. Okay, that's useful. And thanks, Rob, for sharing the data.
Mhm.
So after this, then I think we can look at the individual player level, and as every week we are looking at the ones that are gaining and losing in EV.
Yes. Uh, so from last week to this week, one of the biggest riser is Tsimikas, and the
Right.
reason is obvious. Robertson is out, so he's
Yeah.
expected to play more
Yeah.
minutes.
Yeah.
And over the next 6 game weeks, his EV increased around 4.57, and so essentially every game week there's an increase. Especially this game week, it is 0.9 increase in EV.
Hmm.
And we have Elanga in the second place, 3.83 increase, and then we have
Yeah.
Palmer. Uh, Again, we talked about Palmer. Then we have Ward, Adingra,
Yeah.
Flecken, Mudrik, Doku, Wilson, and Digne. So these are the top players whose EV increased since the last deadline.
Mhm. Yeah, Adingra, we were talking about together, I think, before the pod,
Mm-hmm.
because yeah, Solly March got injured, and Adingra is looking to be his replacement. So I think he's being also mentioned by people, considering also the favorable fixtures of Brighton.
Mm-hmm.
Could be, but on the other hand, yeah, personally, I don't know much about Adingra, so for me, he's not really on my radar, but. Certainly one we could keep an eye on. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, Palmer, we already talked about, and Tsimikas, as you said, with Robertson unfortunately injured. Tsimikas looks to be his backup. So, and also with Liverpool favorable fixtures, he can be an attractive player now to
Yeah.
consider. Also at quite a low price, of course, which makes it also even more interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so these were the ones that gained. Who are the ones that dropped?
So at the top of the list, we have Almiron, lost
Okay.
around 2.09 EV over the next 6 game weeks. And then we have Nico Jackson and Isaac, Mount,
Yeah.
Grealish. As I mentioned, Grealish is always on one of these lists.
Yeah,
And then
indeed.
we have Darwin,
Yeah.
Gakpo, Jesus, Edward, and Rashford. So some
Okay.
of these players, I mean, for example, for Rashford, even though he's like 10th player who lost, EV,
Hmm.
the EV loss in total is only 0.6,
Yeah.
so not
Yeah.
very significant. So one of the, I
No.
mean, so the more important players here is Almiron and Jackson, whose EV dropped more than 1.5 over the next
Yeah.
6 game weeks.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, not much to comment. I mean, Almiron didn't start last game, so I think
Hmm.
it's just now doubt over minutes that
Yeah.
he's not anymore the secured starter, or at least he doesn't look to be. Yeah, number four, Mason Mount. That's just a player that, at the start of the season, I expected him to do really well at United. A bit what we see from Madison now at Spurs. I expected Mount to do the same at United, but so far, unfortunately, it's not clicking for whatever reason. So
Hmm.
yeah, that's a bit unfortunate.
Yeah.
But United in general is struggling.
Yeah.
Hopefully they can improve. It was interesting yesterday. I don't know if you saw the Champions League game, but they were 1-0 up against Copenhagen,
Yeah.
so they were again struggling. And then they got a penalty against them in the final minute. And I was
Yeah.
watching it as an Onana owner, and I was like, "Oh man, if Onana could save the penalty, that could really give him a boost for the next games." And then he saved it. So hopefully for FPL wise, this will be good news that he will
Yeah. And
return some
then
points.
And then he dropped in price, right? Last night.
Yeah, he did draw, but I guess
So saving a penalty and dropping in price, like
yeah,
it should be a unique combination.
I guess
Um,
people already sold him before that, or
yeah,
they
yeah, yeah,
didn't they
probably.
didn't they didn't consider it. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I was
And
following the
especially, I
game.
think people also on Wildcard, probably now it's the time to make a change.
Yeah, I was following the game because as the Galatasaray fan, I was
Oh
hoping
yeah.
that the game will end in a tie. I think it was the most useful score for us, but it's still
Okay.
good.
Okay. All right. Cool. Yeah. So we covered a lot, and I think this is probably the point where we switch to the optimal teams.
Yep.
And again, as I mentioned before, I think a lot of people are on their wild card. So for that reason, I think you prepared a few different optimal teams, right? So
Yeah.
talk us through it and let us know what the difference is as well.
Yeah, certainly. So I kind of changed settings a little bit so that we can kind of see the big picture a little bit
Yeah.
easier. So our raw optimal wildcard 10 consists of Sanchez in the goal, and then we have Saliba, Zinchenko, Cash, Trippier in defense, Saka, Salah, Palmer, Diaby in midfield, and Watkins and Haaland in forward. And in our bench we have Areola, Mubemo, Archer, and Taylor. So this team is again is using Ensemble model, and I solved for next 12 game weeks, and transfers are not allowed. So this is like this is the
Hmm.
team that will probably do pretty well in average.
Yeah.
So the second team I tried is by enabling transfer. So you are kind of
Okay.
like allowing solver to make some changes to this team, and
Mm-hmm.
obviously the picks change a little bit, and most notably you will see, but it brings Alexander Arnold. So and this team consists of Sanchez in the goal again, Gabriel, Zinchenko, Cash, Alexander Arnold. We have Saka, Mubemo, Salah, Palmer, and Watkins and Haaland in our forwards. In the bench we have Areola, Tsimikas, Echan, and Archer. So even though it starts with Alexander Arnold, it goes to Trippier after 3 game weeks, and then
Okay.
eventually he is replaced by Guardiola towards the end of the horizon. And
Mm-hmm.
there is a switch to Salah too. So it starts with Salah and then goes to Son after 6 game weeks, and then goes back to Salah at the very last game week. Obviously, some of these plans are not strict, but since we also have the DK here.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this is the team again with ensemble model, but we are enabling transfer. So as you see, there are some changes. So the parameter selection affects the team you will get.
Yeah.
So
Of
it is
course.
kind of like word playing around, like to see,
Yeah.
what's the EV that I'm gaining by bringing Alexander Arnold in and scheduling a transfer for after 3 game weeks. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and I also tried the no transfer plan, but this time I used FPL review because FPL review was the most accurate model for the
Okay. Yeah. Makes sense.
recent time. So in goal we have Areola, and in defense we have Gabriel, Tsimikas, Pau, and in midfield we have Saka, Mubemo, Salah, Palmer, Son, and in forward
Mm-hmm.
we have Watkins and Haaland. In the
Mm.
bench we have Flecken, Burn, Archer, and Dalot. And I will just compare them side by side. So this is ensemble
Yeah.
model versus review. So obviously there are a few changes. So instead of Sanchez and Areola, it goes for Areola and Flecken. So Areola is kind of the primary goalkeeper here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so Tsimikas is a big difference here. And also,
Mm.
well, both team has Palmer, but existing of Tsimikas and Palmer actually impacts the
Mm.
optimal wildcard 10 quite a bit. Because when we
Mm.
were optimizing for wildcard 8, we didn't have Haaland in any of those teams because
Right.
bringing in Haaland meant that
Yes.
you're effectively losing lots of EV. But
Yes.
because of Tsimikas and Palmer now, you can have both Salah and Haaland in your team. You can even have
Right.
Son in this team and still have a really good lineup. Like you have like Gabriel, Saka, Mubemo. So essentially, players with high projected points, and also
Mm-hmm.
like have good short-term fixtures, and also Watkins, obviously. So, and you even have a relatively nice bench here. So most notable exception is Trippier, obviously in the FPL reviews
Yeah.
team.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
yeah, so these teams I feel like good starting points for people who are considering to wildcard this
Yeah.
game week. But yeah, I mean it is different from wildcard 8. I'm kind of like worried for for my team that I don't have Haaland, but there's not much
Yeah.
to do now.
No. Yeah, indeed. I was about to say that. That's the difference. I also notice. I think in these optimal teams, we can see that Haaland is back, which indeed I think is a difference if we compare it to Wildcard 8. The other thing I notice in the ensemble model, it goes for 3 times Arsenal, and then I think that's something that we already saw in the fixtures, right? If they have
Yeah.
really good fixtures coming up. It also makes it possible now in the optimal team, to your point, to have both Salah and Haaland, because I think previous weeks it was often commented that that's difficult to do unless you sacrifice somewhere else. But again, yeah, indeed, now Tsimikas is there and also Palmer is there. So if you believe, let's say, in the potential of them, then thanks to their favorable price,
Yeah.
you can have quite a decent team now.
Yeah.
And the main
And
difference, yeah, when you went through the ensemble model, one thing I noticed was no Spurs, and I think yeah we talked about it earlier. They've been doing really well, both Son and
mhm.
Madison. So it's quite a big call to go without them. But then in the review model, then Son is back. So I think that's also, of course, something that a lot of people are thinking about now. Like, can I still
Yeah.
fit in Son or not? And do I want to fit in Son?
Yeah, I think yeah, if you bring Son, you're kind of like forced there, right? So you can have Salah, Son, Haaland, obviously,
Yep.
but then it means that Trippier is kind of hard to reach for you.
Right.
That's why the
Right.
model has Burn instead
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
review
Yeah.
optimal. But if
Yeah.
you want to have Trippier, which is also like a good player to pick because he's constantly getting like bonus points too, and they have
Mm-hmm.
also like some of the fixtures they have is good. Not all of the fixtures, obviously, but they are
No.
playing against Wolves this game week and then Bournemouth in 2 game weeks of time.
Yeah.
Remainings are little bit challenging games.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean there are some decisions here, but yeah, again the big
Yeah.
point is Tsimikas and Palmer kind of
Yeah.
they are enabling. So I don't like the term enabler, but they are really enabling a really
Yeah.
good team with multiple premiums.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was thinking about that because I see also a lot of people on Twitter talking about, these enablers. And now of course Palmer is here. So I think it makes it already clear who from the model perspective is the best enabler. But I think there are a few others we should consider. For
Mm-hmm.
example, Fuchsek at West Ham. There is Gordon at Newcastle, Neto at Wolves, and Douglas Luiz, who's been doing well at Villa. And as we discussed earlier, now with Solly March being injured, there's also now Adingra at Brighton. So I was checking it a bit also on the FPL side, looking at midfielders below 5.8 million. And the top five there, if we looked at total points, it's Douglas Luiz, Jensen at Brentford, Neto, Gordon, and Wang. So compared to the names that I mentioned before, then yeah, I didn't mention Jensen and Wang earlier. Personally, I'm not really a fan of Wang. Don't know why, but also if you compare him to Neto, the price difference is not that big. It's zero point 0.4 million. So if possible, I would go for Neto. And for Jensen, a bit similar. I think it's Jensen or Mbuemo, but the price difference is a bit bigger there. Mbuemo is at 6.7, Jensen is at 5.5. So if people do consider Brentford and they cannot fit in Mbuemo, then maybe Jensen could be an option. So looking at it like that, and you put it here as well on the screen for the people on YouTube. I think if we consider the enablers like that, so Palmer, Susak, Gordon, Neto, Douglas Luiz, Adingra, and Jensen, then yeah, how would you rank them based on the data?
So you told me about the midfielders below 5.8 million, and I also
Yes,
checked from the data side and
right.
using. I think this is using FPL review data or Ensemble. I'm not sure, but it should be FPL review. So we have
Okay.
Gibbs White as the highest player in terms of total EV, with 21.99 EV for the next, I think, 6 game weeks. And then we
Yeah.
have Iev, Palmer, Andreas, Ichan, Neto, and William. So yeah, some of the names are common, like Palmer and Neto.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's a little bit of a different list than what you
Yeah,
have. Yeah.
that's interesting. So Gibbs White would be the number one based on data.
Yes.
Okay. Wow. Interesting. I don't see him being mentioned a lot, but yeah, okay, something to consider.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thanks
Mm-hmm.
for covering that one.
And
I think you
yeah,
did some other analysis this week, right?
exactly. So I also checked the sensitivity analysis, and for people who are not again familiar with sensitivity analysis, it's simply when you are kind of running the optimization solver, you get a solution, and it tells you these are the 15 players you need to have. But more often than not, there are certain sensitivities around that team. Like some of the players are really fixed. Like you can have other combinations and those players will be there. Like players like Salah will be
Yeah.
there because his EV is really high. So whatever you do, whatever however you play around it, you should probably keep Salah in.
Right.
So sensitivity is coming from the fact that like some players, like if you move their EV just slightly, very small amount, they might be not optimal anymore. So then sensitivity analysis is perturbing these EV slightly, and then we are solving repeatedly to see how often players appear in the optimal team. So based on that, I used the Ensemble model using the Python solver, 12 game week horizon. Transfers are allowed, but limited by 2 over the horizon. So the goalkeepers, so we have Areola, who's appearing in 70% of the souls, mostly as a bench goalkeeper, but sometimes as a lineup goalkeeper. And then we have Sanchez appearing in 62% of the time. And then comes Onana, only 20% of the time. And then remaining players are Raya, Ellison, Martinez, Pickford, Leno, or Neto. So again, by choosing a goalkeeper among this list, you might be losing some EV in the average case, but in
Mm-hmm.
reality, it might turn out that was the best option.
Okay.
And among defenders, Trippier appears in 70% of the time. We talked about the ensemble models optimal team, and Trippier was there. And he also,
Yeah.
like, even if you perturb the model, Trippier appears in 70% of the time, and then we have Zinchenko, 54%, Alexander-Arnold, 52%. Then we have Taylor, Tsimikas, Cash, Gabriel, Saliba, Pau, Pedro Porro, and Ruben Diaz. And if we
Okay.
check midfielders, we have Salah appearing in 84% of the teams, and then we
Yeah.
have Saka 80%, Mbemo 60%, and then we have Diaby, Palmer, Son, Mitoma, Bruno Fernandes, Heechan, Martinelli, Odegaard, Madison. Yeah, as you see, we have Madison, but he appears in 12% of the optimal teams.
Yeah.
And for forwards, we have Watkins at 88%. And then we have Haaland 48%, Foster 44%, Alvarez 40%, and then comes Solanke, Archer, Joao Pedro, Gabriel Jesus, Darwin, and Eduard. So based
Right.
on that, players that you might want to fix to your team are Watkins,
Yeah.
Salah, Saka, probably Mbemo, and among defenders, Trippier only, and Areola. So anyone else besides these players are kind of like something you can play around. But
Right.
and again, I'm strictly talking about the ensemble model. So if you are using this kind of a like ensemble model, these are the players. Like after seeing the results, I will
Yeah.
fix these players to my team when I'm
Right.
getting consecutive solves. It will be also faster for you.
Yeah. So I think sometimes the term essential is being used. So you would call those players essential in this case.
Yes, essential.
All right. All right. Good. Good. Was there anything else you prepared for people to consider this week, especially when on wildcard?
Someone also asked me to produce wildcard teams for people whose team value is lower than mine because when I usually
Right.
prepare these, I'm using my own team, And
Okay.
wildcard 8 actually worked well for me in terms of team value, but
Yeah.
some people don't have this.
No.
So my solver wasn't able to actually handle, starting with a negative in the bank amount, because I was trying to
Okay.
replicate using a negative in the bank amount. I need to
Yeah.
do a change. So I wasn't able to generate them yet, but I will try to generate optimal
Yeah, but
teams and
probably
how they change.
the discussion we had on enablers
Yeah.
is then relevant, I think, because
Mm-hmm.
you might have to add another enabler
Yep.
to if you don't have the high team value.
Yeah. So yeah, I wasn't able to prepare it, but yeah, I will try to come up with something and hopefully share on Twitter X.
Okay, cool. So yeah, good luck to everyone, especially if you have your wildcard active. Sertalp, you used yours already. So what are your
Yes.
plans for this week?
I am thinking of having two Arsenal midfielders using my two free transfers and setting
Okay.
Bruno Fernandes and
Yeah.
Madison for Saka and Odegaard. I think that was the optimal move when I
All
checked
right.
earlier. But yeah, I will definitely get at least one of them, but
Yeah.
probably both of them. We will see.
Okay.
And what are you doing this
Interesting.
game week?
Yeah, actually, I made my transfers already, which
Oh,
I
you
know
did?
normally is not recommended to do, especially in a busy European week. But when was it? I think it was Monday night that I saw Salah would go up and Bruno, sorry, Bruno would go down, and that was actually the exact switch I wanted to make. So and I did lose already some team value, so I didn't want to lose more. So I made my moves. I went for Bruno to Salah, as I mentioned, and in order to achieve that, I had to downgrade Mbuemo. And I was considering all the enablers, and I went for Douglas Luiz just because
Ah,
Villa has really good fixtures. So
okay.
I want to bet on the fixtures there. So yeah, it's exciting
Okay.
to have the Egyptian king back in my team for the first time this season. And I'm combining him with the Norwegian Viking and the Korean Ronaldo. So nothing
it's
can go wrong, right? I hope.
it's like boss bass all stars.
Yeah, kind of. So let's see. I hope that will work out. So yeah, I went for my transfers, and what also helps, I do have my wild card. So if there is bad news this week, if some players get injured, I can always still decide to hit the wild card button. But for
Okay.
now, that's not the plan. All right, I think the last thing to cover is the captaincy options.
Captaincy for game week 10, Salah is ahead of everyone else. 7.96 EV in
Okay.
Ensemble, and
Yeah.
the closest player is Saka with 6.9, so almost 1 EV difference between them. So, well, obviously, people who have Salah is the best option, and then we
Right.
have Saka, and then comes Haaland with
Yeah.
6.66.
Hmm.
And then we have Odegaard 6.34 and Watkins at 6.16 for people who are looking for a differential captain. And
Yes.
Salah is also the optimal captain in most models like Draft Hound, Fantasy Football Scout, FPL Review, FPL Team, and Mikael Tokvam is favoring Salah.
Hmm.
Only models that have different optimal captains are Fantasy Football Hub has Haaland ahead of Salah, almost 5% more points, and Fantasy Football Fix has Saka ahead of Salah, but the difference is around like 3%, not very
Yeah.
significant. They're almost the same.
Okay.
But yeah,
Hmm.
I think Salah is the best captain. That's very obvious,
Okay.
I guess.
Yeah, looking at it from this chart is obvious. I think when I was looking at the fixtures, Salah they play against Forest at home,
hmm
and Saka plays against Sheffield at home. So thinking about the opponents, I prefer the game against Sheffield.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think I'm confident enough to put it on Saka. But yeah, not sure yet.
Yeah, as we talked about the projected goals, Arsenal is expected to score more to Sheffield
Yeah,
than Liverpool to Nottingham Forest. So
right.
I kind of understand, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, cool. All right, I think that covers it then for today, right? Or was there anything
Yes,
else?
No, that was all.
Okay, cool. So then let's finish again by looking at our mini league. We now have 296 teams in it. We're almost at 300, so that's exciting. Thanks again, everyone, for joining. And you can still join if you want to. The code is 0JSDLA. And we've seen a few changes in the top. Last week's number two, C. Britnell, with the team Cruise Control, is now number one after a big score of 110 points and a total score of 647. So that's really well done. And if you're listening, C. Britnell, I'm not sure if you're a man or a woman. So I would like to know actually. So reach out on Twitter, then we can give a bit more information about you in our next pod. And the rank of this team is now 996. So we have a top
Nice.
1K team leading the mini league. And last week's number one, Alex Wilmot, is now number two. His team, Are You Not Entertained, also had a decent score of 96 points, but we have a really competitive mini league. So even
Yeah.
with 96 points, he dropped to number two. But the gap is only 2 points, though, to the number one. So keep it up, Alex. And in the third spot, we have a new name. It's Tobias Ljungberg with his team Tbilisi Finest. And Tobias had a game week score of 113 points and a total score of 634. So congrats to the three of you. And Sertalp, you had a good score with 120 points. So I seen that you're climbing the ranks. But I also looked at the highest score in our mini league, and actually that was 129 points.
Oh.
So there was still some room for improvement in your score.
God damn it.
And yeah, so that's congrats to Herpal Sahuti and also to Cameron Scott. There were two managers who had 129 points. So that was the highest score, at
Awesome.
least in our mini league. Well done. All right, so this was it for today. This was FPL Optimized Podcast, episode number 63. Thank you for listening. Good luck with making your decisions, and may your arrow be green. We'll be back with another episode next week. Make sure to subscribe to our podcast so you'll get notified when the next episode is released. And do follow us on Twitter. For Sertalp, it's at Sertalp Bilal, and for me, it's at Belfi BB. And as you know, you can also find us on YouTube.
And until next time, stay curious and stay analytical. Goodbye.
Goodbye.